He's as important to his area of music as James Brown is to the funk and to dance music.
He's got a very exclusive sound and a very original sound, and it's, you know, inspiring music.
It was a revelation, actually. It really was. It was like a bolt from the sky.
He seduced people into listening to different things and different structures.
I've seen Steve Reich play a few times. And the first time I think actually was here in the Royal Festival Hall.
Steve Reich is a vital part of musical history, really one of the founding fathers of electroacoustic music, and really is one of the important linchpins and the turning point in 20th century music. I mean, he's extremely important from the aspect of sampling. You could see him already working with sort of very basic sampling technology, tape loops, which is really what people had access to then, instead of the sample hadn't really been invented yet.
Bands were going in and filling the thing up with orchestras and strings, and everything was getting so dense. Horrible, actually. I mean, it was a terrible period in some ways. Everything was getting thick and dense and heavy and dinosaur-like. Then I heard this piece of music, this piece called It's Gonna Rain by Steve Reich, and it changed my life, without a doubt. I listened to it and I thought, I now understand music in an entirely different way.
He began to warn the people. He said, after a while, it's going to rain after a while, for 40 days and for 40 nights. And the people didn't believe him. And they began to laugh at him. And they began to mock him. And they began to say, it ain't going to rain.
A friend wanted to make a movie down in Union Square in San Francisco. He said, this is an amazing black preacher. You've got to come down and record him. And he was preaching about the flood, about Noah. I came back to the studio with these striking speech recordings, and I started making tape loops. I was aware of tape loops, and I was sort of fooling around with that. Anyway, I thought, well, gee, wouldn't it be interesting if there were two tape loops? And so every time he said, it's going to rain, the word it's would come in on rain, and then you'd hear, it's going to rain, 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 rain. So as I kept the headphones on, it seemed as if they were jockeying back and forth inside of my head from one side to the other, and it finally sort of moved out of my left ear and down my left shoulder and down my left arm, and crossed the room, and then began to reverberate, and then began to echo, and then began to come kind of like a rounder cannon, and eventually it's going to rain, rain. And I thought, wow, I mean, I got where I was going, but the journey was more interesting than the destination. And so right away I thought, well, if I could control with my thumb on the supply reel of one of the machines exactly what the rate of change would be, then it'd be a whole new way of making music.
I thought, that's the kind of music I want to make. God, it's the brain that does the composing. This is where the composing happens, in the listener's brain. And that was a big, big message for me.
I had to open the blues up and let some of the blues blood come out to show them.
The most important piece for me, and the one that still holds a huge resonance, is Come Out to Show Them, which is a tape loop of a boy saying, let the bruised blood come out to show them, and has a thick sort of New York accent.
Come out to show them, 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 come out to show them.
The fact that the kid is talking about being beaten up in a police station as well just makes it political, and it brings in a whole other social and political dimension that I'd never heard overtly in orchestral classical music.
There is an element of that is about small changes over a period of time. It's almost working your head into a trance-like state.
I was getting friends round, and I'd stick them between two speakers and give them a large joint and say, listen to Come Out to Show Them, and turn the lights off and leave them by themselves for about 20 minutes. And then come back, and they'd used to be lying on the floor having some sort of strange fit because they'd never heard anything like it before.
For me, there's a real division. I'm not interested in sine wave generators. I'm not interested in synthesizers. I'm interested in sampling.
What he was doing in 1964, in a way, people didn't even pick up on probably for 20 years after that.
There's also a point where his work moves away from tape loops. It begins to work a lot more with the idea of percussion, and takes the sort of percussion away from the sort of rear end of the orchestra, if you like, and starts to liberate it away from musical punctuation and making it sing in its own right.
He went to Africa and studied under a master drummer in Ghana, I believe.
Listening to African drumming and going over there and playing somewhat, that sort of was able to bring something in where I didn't want to become, I'm clearly not an African, but where I wanted to bring something in that would give me a new way of thinking. I want to imitate the sound of that kind of music. Maybe learn something from the way it's put together.
Anyone who's into music nowadays is into the beats. That it's, the drums are all important because they speak directly to the body. So for a white intellectual to actually be able to take a step sideways and get down with that at the time was pretty phenomenal. And, as I say, we're reaping the fruits of that still today.
Four Organs is a pretty punky anthem in a way. It's an aggressive piece.
And we did this in a program of the Boston Symphony Orchestra. And we got about, I'd say, a third of the way into the piece when protests began to erupt. The nature of these outbursts got more and more violent. One woman came running down the aisle and stamped on the front of the stage with her fists and said, "I can't stand it! I can't stand it!" The audience became wilder and wilder. I was so happy. I said, "Steve, this is it. This is fantastic. You realize what you've done. You've gotten under their skin."
"18 Musicians" panders more to the beautiful side than to the experimental side, in a sense. It's great washes of sound, and it's a very warm experience.
The piece basically was me saying, all right, I've been writing everything in one chord basically for 20 minutes or longer in drumming. Now what if you just what if I started to change, sort of thicken the plot harmonically, just have more harmonic movement. And there's more harmonic movement in the first 5 minutes of the piece than there is in all the other pieces strung together, the earlier pieces. So it was kind of like a big rush of excitement for me to have all that color in it and all those instruments. So in a sense, it's taking one step back. It's a less radical piece, if you like, than drumming. But hey, everybody loves it. So who cares?
I think Music for 18 Musicians is probably my favourite piece of music ever.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that, for me as well.
It was so different to anything we'd heard before, in that it was minimalist music, but it was very tonal.
It's a piece that you would hear a lot at ambient gigs in the sort of early 90s, and alongside things like Pink Floyd and that sort of thing.
The whole idea of minimal music is related to today's ambient music. That the idea that there could be a piece of music where one is as interested in the tones and timbres of the sounds that are playing, perhaps more interested in that than the actual musical notes which are being played.
I just came back from Ibiza last week, and sitting on Satrincha Beach, you would not be surprised to hear a bit of Steve Reich, because a lot of the music you're listening to has actually been really quite influenced by what he's done.
The most obvious parallels between his music and today are in dance music, like everything from a group like Orbital, who are directly influenced by Steve Reich, to a lot of trance music is based on the same kind of very simple kind of melodic patterns that kind of build and ebb and flow.
I think one of his greatest achievements really has been to link the experimental sort of classical world and opening that out to people from the popular world.
What he was doing 20 years before really kind of almost wrote the rule book, and then he thought, well, I've done that, I'm bored with that, now I'm going to do something else.
He continues to be important in the sense that you're not quite sure what he's going to come up with next.
Two things I wanted to do since the 60s are finally possible. One of them is slow motion sound, i.e. just the way you can go to a film and see things slow down. In the old days, if you slow down the sound, you get Darth Vader. But now you can slow down the sound and it just gets very slow. The other thing is literally the equivalent in sound of stop action, freeze frame. So that I'm talking and I come to the end of the sentence and I said the word zero and you heard the word zero and the O just goes on as long as you want it to go on. And the results are kind of like speakers say something and then they leave their tones behind them, and the next speaker is harmonized by those tones from the preceding, and then they leave others, and these chords begin to come up, all with these overtones of the meaning of what's been said.
If you ask people who are interested in music and the history of music and where it's come from, they will know Steve Reich, because you can't miss his contribution to it.
That's almost the definition of a pioneer, someone who's created their own sound and has been copied, and a lot of people have copied him.